Reggie here, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. In this video, we are going to take a look at a couple of comics that you may want to consider snagging now. And as part of this video, we're going to look at a range of comics in terms of their ages, the publishers that release these books, as well as how these books are currently performing. Some of these books are just sputtering along. They seem to have reached the bottom and they're just kind of sputtering along. Some of them are on a precipitous decline. Others may have reached the bottom and are starting to rebound. But generally speaking, these are all solid books that, again, folks may want to think about picking up. I will remind you that you should never substitute my judgment for your own. So take the time to listen to the rationale, listen to what it is that I'm saying, do your own research, and then decide if these are the types of books that you are interested in picking up. My thought here is that potentially these are books that have been on your radar that you haven't picked up for one reason or another. And that's part of why I'm trying to showcase these books, because again, they're really awesome comics. So the very first book that we're going to look at is in many ways a modern classic book. It is a really cool book. We are, of course, talking about Batman issue number 635. This is the first appearance of Jason Todd as the Red Hood. And this is a really cool book that I recently spoke to somebody about. And that's part of the reason why it was on my mind. A lot of the data, well, technically all of the data that we're going to be looking at in this video is coming from Go Collect. So as we scroll down here and start to look at some of this data, what we can see is that there are roughly 2,300 copies of this book that are blue label. There are a total of 2,400 that are on the census. So you have some that are, well, clearly signature series and 9 qualified books. When it comes to modern books, because this one is a modern book, having been released in 2005, I think that the sweet spot for these books is the 9.8, but you can make the adjustment, right? And see what might work best for you. But first, let's look at this. We can see here that the 9.8 has basically declined from about $333 to what is that, $265. The 9.6 has declined from about $200 at the 1-year average to about $179 at the 30-day. And again, as you go down the list, you're seeing some declines here where there is data. So again, let's go ahead and look at the 9.8. There are roughly 900 copies of this book on the CGC census. So let's click on it and see how this book is performing. And again, on the right hand side, you can see the averages for this thing, the 1 year down to the 30-day, and then you can actually see how it plays out here graphically, and then some individual actual sales, which I find incredibly helpful. But you can see here just graphically, this book is kind of sort of just sputtering along down here at the end. It's relatively flat. In April, the average price for this book was $325. In March, it was $263. So a little bit of an increase there from March into April. But going back in December, this book was $322. And if we go all the way back, it appears that this book had a high water mark in September of 2021 at $545, which is a nice chunk of change for a modern comic. But you can see here when we go to the individual sales, you can see what's happening here. Most recently, $324, $300, $345. I don't know what that one sold for, but we can assume that it was less than $330, which was the best offer there. Somebody got a smoking deal here back in March for $86, but not a bad price for this book. And again, it's a great book. This is a great comic that potentially a lot of people have been priced out of for a long period of time. Most recent average price, what was this? $325. I'm sorry. Yeah, $325. When was the last time we saw that? Last time we saw this book at around that price was in December of 2020 when it was going for $310. So a lot of folks will say, is this a book that could decline even more? Who knows? Who knows? I mean, it could easily increase as much as it could decrease. But again, if you look at what's been happening with this book, it's been somewhat flat. It's been somewhat flat for a while outside of this one sale right there at around the $300 mark. And so again, not a terrible comic to pick up if you can find it at the right price. And again, just a solid book that I have in my collection. So cool book there. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at another example. This one's a classic. This one's a classic that a lot of people have been priced out of. This is Fantastic Four issue number 94, the first appearance of Agatha Harkness and the first appearance of Ebony. I'm not quite sure who Ebony is, to be honest with you, but Agatha Harkness is this is a character that captured people's attention with the WandaVision show. It was announced that Agatha was going to have her own show. That show has been subsequently delayed several times, which might be why the prices for this book are what they are. And it could also be, again, a great time to pick this book up. If this is one that has been on your radar, now could potentially be the time to pick it up now that people aren't necessarily paying attention to it because everything has been delayed. And maybe the show will come back. Who knows what the future holds? But if this is a book you want to get it at the right price. There are not a lot of copies of this book out there. And you can see here that when it comes to Universal Blue Labels, there are 1,300 copies out there. And then when you look at across all grades, there's 1,300 copies out there. So not a whole lot of books out there. There are some signature here, 13. There's some restored copies, and there are 7 qualified, but the bulk of the books are sitting in the blue label range. Unfortunately, there is not a ton of sales data in the last 30 days for a lot of the higher grades, but we're going to go down here and look at the 9.0. There are 99 copies of this book on the census. 36 of them have traded hands. There's a fair market value of $525. And you can see the 1 year average here at $650. Down to the 90-day at $532, and a little bit of an uptick here at $542 for the 30-day average. So let's go ahead and drill in, and you can again see here graphically how this is kind of playing out. And on the right-hand side, you can see some of those same numbers that we just went through a hot second ago. But again, another book that appears to just be sputtering along as of basically this last year, right? Or since the start of the year. The book started off the year at $475. It bounced up to $528 and is now sitting at $541. That's off of a high of $1,100. That is off of a high watermark of $1,100 back in 2021. And again, this book is sitting on average at $541. The last time we saw that was probably around, I'm guessing around early 2021. That's my guess based upon the date. Again, not a whole lot of copies of this book out there, so it's really hard sometimes to have a good graph here that shows you exactly what's happening. But there's a delta here where back in November of 2020, the book was going for $120. And then all of a sudden in October of 2021, it jumped up to $630. So again, we're somewhere between there. But again, not a terrible price to pay for a really solid book that was out in 1970. And so you can see here some of the sales data. The book, again, has been sputtering along the last little bit here in the 500s. There was a low mark, again, at the beginning of 2023. And before that, the book was definitely trending a little bit higher. There's a couple of sales here at 673, 630 in 2022. So again, not a terrible book, and certainly not a terrible price to pay at present. There are worse places to have bought this book, right? At the peak, that would have been worse. Here, let's look at the 8.5. There's 123 copies of this book on the census. You can see here what's happening with the 1 year, 90-day, and the 30-day. Definitely a decline there as we glance at those numbers. And again, you can see the drop off here. You can see the graphic drop off here to around 330. This book in February of 2022 was going for $810. I would have hated to have bought that book at that price only to see it drop down to $330 at present. So again, you can see here it's kind of it's relatively low, right? If you consider where it was, of course, there's a couple of sales here at the 600 mark back in November of 2022. There's one here earlier in 2022 around the $600 mark. Man, somebody tried to get a best offer here. White Pager for $875. I wonder what that one went for. I'd have to look that one up. But again, not a terrible book. If this is one that has been on your radar, now could potentially be the time to pick this one up. So let's go ahead and glance at another Silver Age classic, and some would even say a major key, major grail. This is the first appearance of Thor and also Donald Blake. This is Journey into Mystery, issue number 83. I am not a huge Thor fan, I will tell you that, but this is a cool book. There is no doubt about that. This is a cool book. And as we look at what's happening here, you can see there's not a whole lot of sales data. There are, 1,700 copies, blue label of this book out there. Overall, 2,300 copies with a healthy number of restored. There are 333 restored copies, 212 signed copies. And again, the bulk of them, 1,746 sitting at the blue label. But not a whole lot of 30-day sales data here for this book. So it makes it really hard to kind of know exactly how this book is performing. But as we go down the list here, we can see that there is a 3.5 here. 3.5, there's 136 of them on the census, 74 sales at fair market value of $9,000, which is that is a chunk of change. But again, not a ton of copies out there for a classic character, that being Thor. So it stands to reason. But let's go ahead and click on this and see what the data looks like. And again, graphically, you can see how this is playing out. The book is definitely on the downward side of things. High watermark for this book in June of 2021, $15,000 for a 3.5. That is a redunculous amount of money. Hit a high water mark again, 13,000, another high water mark, 13,000. And now we are sitting at that for that same book at $8,400. And again, this is why I say now potentially isn't a bad time to pick this up. There are not a lot of copies of this book out there overall, and generally the price is favorable. Could it go lower? Absolutely. But is it way off of its high? Yeah, it is. This book, $8,400 earlier this month. The sale before that at the beginning of the year, $9,300. That is a delta of $900. The sale before that at the end of the year of 2022 in December here was $10,200. That is off $1,800 versus where it is at present. And if we scroll down here to the bottom, in November of 2021, this book was basically going for $1,400. And again, where it is right now, $8,400, you're looking at roughly $5,500 off of that book. Again, not a terrible price to pay if Thor is a book that you really want. If you're into Silver Age books, if you're looking for potential investment opportunities, I don't know that Thor is going anywhere. Maybe he's run his course when it comes to the MCU, maybe. But this is still a classic comic from Jack Kirby that is not getting any younger. Like it is, this book isn't getting any fresher, right? I mean, this is a fantastic book. And again, now could be the time to actually snag this comic. All right. So let's go ahead and look at one last example. And this is a book that was flying high for a while. This book was flying high for a while, and I will tell you, I have a 9.6 copy of this book. I wanted a 9.8, but I could not bring myself to pay the price for this book. I could not bring myself to pay the 9.8 price, especially when I had the 9.6 come out of the 100K collection. But there are 13,000 copies of this book out there, 14,000 total graded if you include all of the labels out there. And again, with this book from 1980, we are going to look at the 9.8. There are 2,500 copies on the census. About 2,000 of them, or 1,800, have traded hands. The fair market value for this book is $550. Let's go ahead and click on this one to see how this book book has been performing. And again, graphically, you can see exactly what has happened. This book was going for $1,400, which is a crazy amount of money. $1,400 for this book in 2021, roughly $1,400 in 2022, and is now $427. So a lot of people again will say, well, it could go lower. It could, but it also could go higher. Who knows what the future of She-Hulk will be? Will they announce a second season of her show? Will she be introduced into a movie? Who knows? But if this is a character, if this is a book that has been on your radar, if you've been priced out of it, now could be a good time to get this book, right? Let's say that it goes down another 10%, 20%. That's not a whole lot of money, especially when you consider where it has been. That is where the bulk of the decline has already occurred. This is not going to be a $50 book, right? I think that's what people think. I do not believe that this will be a $50 book, but you can see here the last few sales: $435, $395, $420, $469. Again, it seems to be sputtering along at around that $400 mark. Maybe somebody paid a little bit too much here with this fixed price at $469. But again, not a terrible book to add to one's collection. Buying this book at where it was, that potentially was a terrible idea. But buying it where it is now, maybe not so much. Maybe not so much a terrible idea. Again, the origin of She-Hulk and the first appearance of the character, also not a terrible read. I will tell you that, not a terrible read. So there you go. That is essentially my rundown of books that you may want to consider snagging. I am not a financial analyst, so again, do not substitute my judgment for your own. What I've tried to do is to highlight a couple of really cool books that could make for wonderful additions to someone's collection. Take the time, think about it, consider it before you do nothing, or before you do anything, and maybe you actually do nothing, and that is okay as well. If you have not subscribed to the channel, I want to personally invite you. I want to invite you right now to go ahead and tap that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and that way you won't miss out on any of the content that I release here on the channel. If you need to reach out to me for whatever reason, you can do that on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.
This thing on? Mic check. I just want to make sure y'all can hear me clearly. Yeah. Should you practice art, or should art be your practice? I had a question, so I asked it. Not to anyone specifically, but to my inner God, you know? The one that's gonna be a master, the one that's more than a rapper, the one that's an educator, the one that seeks enlightenment. He travels with concepts, he's got the mindset expansive. He understands that his time combined with travel and concepts makes his mind convex. Sort of like when you look at a brain scan, straight off meditation, we was concaving until we had that eternal dialogue that created our dialect. Now we in distinct rooms of pure souls having them conversations, synergy and combinations. You fly and we waiting, Indian style in the gold.